I'm Glenn Clayton. I'm the CEO and founder of Appleton Learning, but the title that I'm working on obtaining is that of change agent, and a change agent for education. I was a UAH business student a few years back and had no desire to go into education, no desire at all, was not even intrigued by education. I was learning international business, studying Mandarin, and I wanted to travel the world. But as is often the case in college, I was broke, and I started tutoring people on the side to earn extra income. What I realized is about 2 years into that, I developed a passion for education, not simply the art of educating people, but the fact that education as an industry lacked so much innovation and so many of the things that excited me. And what my, oh, we got a zone alert on. See, I knew there was going to be a teacher up there that didn't want to hear what I had to say. But what my experience has given me is a little bit of a unique opportunity to look at schools from the most elite private schools in the country to some of the lowest performing public schools in the worst parts of our country. And I've seen that education can take a lot of lessons from business and what needs to be improved. So the 15 things that I'm going to share with you come from one assumption, that assumption being that education today is broken and needs to be fixed. The first lesson is to make learning fun. Everybody in business knows that if you want people to continue to use your product or service, you have to make it an enjoyable experience. And to be honest, schools today are boring as hell. So what we need to do is make learning more fun. Learning in itself is not a boring activity. In fact, we do it every day. Every time you Google something, every time that you seek out new information, you're learning. But the process that we have developed to educate students in America is often a very boring and unexciting process. And so the first thing that we need to do is focus on making learning fun. If you look at what a student is faced with today, they leave home where they probably have an iPhone, an iPad, an Xbox. We saw the cool Xbox remote earlier. And all these things that are stimulating their mind and engaging them. And then they go to a cinder block, off-white classroom with fluorescent lights and listen to a teacher talk. Which would you rather do? And you can understand why it's so hard to get kids to want to go to school today. And we run into these challenges every day at Appleton and trying to figure out how do we make this process of learning more exciting. Schools should be places that kids want to go. They should be exciting. They should be opportunities for them to innovate and explore new ideas. The second lesson is that competition's a good thing. I often use the example of, imagine if you were zoned to your grocery store. If you had to go to Publix because of where you live, or you had to go to Kroger because you live on another part of town. Well, what incentive would they have to have the freshest produce, the best meat, the best customer service? Because you've got to come either way. And that's what schools are, the position that schools are in today, is that kids have to come either way. Unless they can afford to exit the system, the public school system, they have to go to those schools. And that takes away an inherent innovation need in schools. They don't have to be innovative. They don't have to be great, and they don't have to deliver a great service. Bad schools should close, and students and parents should make the decision on which schools they go to. School choice, often the opponents of school choice in charter schools, is that a lot of charter schools shut down. And I think that's great. How many bad public schools shut down? You know, we've got plenty in our own town that are still running. So schools should shut down, schools should close, and parents and students should be able to decide where they educate their children. The third thing is meritocracy. We must admit that some teachers are bad and that they must be replaced. Teachers should be treated as professionals, not as industrial line workers who need their jobs protected through unions. And until we realize this and accept this, we're going to have a hard time truly innovating in education. Because teachers' unions, and I will probably upset somebody now, teachers' unions are great at their job, and their job is representing the interests of teachers, not students. And we must understand this if we're truly to innovate and change. Another idea that's common in business is that there's a difference between technicians and managers. Technicians know the work that they do, managers manage them. We should hire managers to be principals and school leaders, not teachers. Because the process of managing an organization, managing a budget, what I do every day is different than teaching people. And those skill sets often don't coexist in the same person. So although I know absolutely nothing about education, well, I know a little bit now, but it's not my trade, I'm a manager, and I'm good at finding people who are smarter than me in education and facilitating their activities. Customer service. This is a totally foreign concept to any teacher. The idea that the student is your customer and that we should try to attract students. But some of our best schools, our most innovative schools, understand this and approach running their school as trying to attract customers. You should be trying to figure out, how do we make our students want to come to school, rather than how do we figure out how to keep them locked in. And I just wanted to use this example. This is your school lunch. This is your lunch when you get a choice. So perhaps approaching it that way, I don't know that it would improve the lunch menu, but at least it would be a start. Profit. It's not a bad word. In education, profit might as well have 4 letters because it's treated that way. And we run into this every day, this concept that you're making money off of children, and that's terrible. But the reality is that profit is the cost of efficiency, and we should embrace for-profit schools and for-profit organizations being involved in supporting education. Fear is something that is often not embraced in the traditional public school today. Fail early and responsibly. Failure is one of the best tools for learning. Our last speaker talked about the failures that he's had and the lessons that were learned from that. But failure is something that is to be avoided at all costs in most schools. We don't want our students to take risks. We don't want our students to fail and to have the opportunity to fail, when in fact that's exactly what we should be encouraging them to do in school. And that's what happens in business. We take risks in business, we take chances, sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. And this lesson could have quite a bit of impact in our schools. The other idea is one that I've been taught by my friend Dr. Daniel Crosby, who'll be speaking later, and that it's okay to be a talent snob. We talk about the idea of being highly qualified or being highly talented. Today there's a notion in public education that we need highly qualified teachers, and that means teachers who are certified and have gone to school to be teachers. Well, that sounds great, but I would much prefer somebody who's highly talented over somebody who's highly qualified due to their credentials. The example I use is that of Einstein. Einstein could have gone and taught physics at any university in the world, but he'd have a hard time doing it at any public high school. And that seems to be counterintuitive to me. So I think we should look to have highly talented teachers instead of highly qualified teachers in the traditional sense. Schools should try to build a brand, because building a brand, and it's something that we do every day at Appleton and are very conscious of, is not simply making a logo. Building a brand is building an identity for an organization, knowing who you are, what you stand for, what your principles are. And schools need to build brands. They need to understand what they believe and be able to communicate that to their students and their parents. Strategy. This is a totally foreign concept to most schools. Don't create a plan until you have a strategy. Schools are really, really good at making plans, but often terrible at making plans according to a strategy. And so if our schools had a strategy for what their plans were going to accomplish, we might have more successful plans. But often strategy, a strategic planning session is a foreign concept in most public schools, but something that they could look to the business sector for indication on how to do. Change or die. This reminds me of my 3rd grade classroom, by the way. In business, we understand that we must evolve to stay relevant. But schools today are run the same way they were 200 years ago, from the schedule to the way that we teach. The idea that we're teaching by standing up in front of a classroom with textbooks in this computer age is still silly. I mean, it's nuts to think that we educate children the same way that we did 200 years ago. This was my 10th grade classroom. Looks matter. We understand that in businesses. We like to go to restaurants and frequent establishments that we find pleasing. This very auditorium that we're in is an aesthetic pleaser to the eye, and most businesses understand that that's a way to attract people in. Most public schools don't understand that. This is a picture from one of our partner schools, Ron Clark Academy. That is the slide in their lobby. So in case the students don't want to take the stairs, they can take the slide. And I mean, imagine as a student, who wouldn't want to go to that school, right? I mean, there's secret passages, there's graffiti on the walls. It's an ideal example of what schools should be. Set expectations, not regulations. In education today, we are great at setting regulations, but often poor at setting expectations. And when we do set expectations, we also set the regulations to go along with it, from how much time a student has to spend in their chair, to the exact curriculum that they must use, to how much time has to be spent on reading, when in reality what we should do is set expectations and provide talented educators with the freedom to figure out how to achieve those expectations. And this is a quote that one of my mentors gave me: "The path you take is not important, only the destination matters." And that's something that we should embrace in our public schools, that if this school wants to have the kids come in at 10 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, if that works for them, great, who cares? But that's often overlooked. Another one is why. Why is more important than what or how? I'll use Apple as an example because it's a company that we often look to at Appleton for inspiration, not just because we share 5 letters. But Apple is not in the iPod business. Apple is not in the computer business. Apple is in the business of challenging how we utilize technology to improve our lives. And they know that. And if you asked an executive what business they were in at Appleton, or at Apple, sorry, they would say that they're not in the computer business. They're in the technology business and understanding how to use that to improve lives. Well, schools need to understand what business they're in before they focus on what they do or how they do it. They need to understand what they believe and what they're trying to accomplish and what the end goal of their organization's existence is. And the last one I'll leave you with is don't stop. Continue to innovate, continue to challenge the status quo. As soon as we think that we've got it, in business we understand that we have just lost it. And that's something that schools need to realize. Once they improve, if they adopt these principles and were to make a lot of progress and we were very, very satisfied with our schools, that's the exact moment that we should change. Because if we don't, we'll become irrelevant. So those are my 15 business rules for education and the principles that I believe if we embraced would help improve the education system that we have today. And I hope that in some way I've helped to accomplish my task of becoming a change agent by changing the way that you think about education and the way that we approach it, and that hopefully after this you'll actually go do something about it. Because it's until we stand up and demand that we rethink education in our country, we can't change it. Thank you.